We'll do a review of Likutei Sichos in Chelek Yutes, volume 19, the second sicha for the Parsha Voeschanan. Over here we discuss the two mitzvahs of the Tefillin Shel Yad and the Tefillin Shel Rosh, and that first you put on the Shel Yad and then you put on the Shel Rosh. When you remove them, you remove the Shel Rosh first, and then you remove the Shel Yad. That means that whenever you have the Shel Rosh on, you'll always also have the Shel Yad on. You always have to have the Shel Rosh on when the Shel Rosh is on. So therefore, you have to first remove the Shel Rosh and then remove the Shel Yad. When you put on, it goes the reverse order. The mitzvah of putting on tefillin is we find in our parsha, in Parsha Voeschanan. Over here, the pasuk says, "Ukeshartom leois al yodecha," tie them as a sign, the sign on your hand, and then they should be teitafos between your eyes. This is the tefillin shel yad, and that's the tefillin shel rosh. So we'll see in the Gemara learns from these psukim, from this pasuk, that first you put on the shel yad, and then you put on the shel rosh, and when you remove, first you remove the shel rosh, and then you remove the shel yad. There's another pasuk in Parshas Boy. Over here is also in the parsha. The pasuk says the two parshas. You have the Parshas Kaddish and you have the Parshas V'hoyo. So this is the Parshas Kaddish, and first in pasuk Tes. So there also says V'hoyo l'cho lo'is al yodcha. First you put it on as a sign on your hand, and then it says that it should be a remembering between your eyes. That's the Shel Rosh. So over here too, first the Shel Yad and then the Shel Rosh. In the Sifri, we learn from this pasuk that that's the order. First the Shel Yad, then the Shel Rosh, and when you remove the Shel Rosh and then the Shel Yad. And then there's another pasuk actually in pasuk later on in V'hoyo Kiviyacha, in which the pasuk again repeats this. And then we also have in the parshas V'hoyo lo'is al yodcha. But these are all psukim, as we'll see. The Rebbe will discuss the difference why the Gemara uses the psukim in the Parshas Voeschanan, our parsha, and the Sifri uses the psukim over there, and exactly a lot of details. The Rebbe will explain the whole idea, why does the Shel Rosh come second, and the Rebbe will explain the differences, the way the psukim are written in our parsha and the way the psukim are written in the Parshas Boy, as we'll look inside the sicha. Let's learn now inside. Eis Aleph. Wegen der Seder Hanochas Tefillin, about the order, the way we put the tefillin on. Zog the Gemara. This is a Gemara in Menachos Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says like this: Tana, we learned in Abraisa. Kishehu maniach, when the person lays the tefillin, maniach shel yad. First you place the shel yad, v'achar kach maniach shel rosh, and then you place the one on the head. Ukeshehu chayletz, but when you remove the tefillin, chayletz shel rosh, v'achar kach chayletz shel yad. First you remove the one from the head, and then you remove the one from the head. So that's the Gemara brings down. So the Gemara like this: it's okay, we understand why when we place the tefillin, first we place the shel yad, and only afterwards we place the shel rosh, because that's the way it's written in the pasuk. Ukshartem leois al yodecha. First it says you should tie them for a sign on your hand. And then only afterwards, it should be teitafos between your eyes. So then you have to put on the shel rosh. So first you put the shel yad, and then you should put the shel rosh. So that's why it's understood. It makes sense why we're telling you maniach shel yad v'achach maniach shel rosh. But he's done the mitzvah. He put on the tefillin the proper way. So when he's removing it, what difference does it make? How do you know chaylet shel rosh v'achach shel yad? You're telling me that you first have to remove the head and then the hand minolam. How do we know this? Omar Rabbo, says Rabbo. Rabhuna Asberili. Rabhuna explained it to me. Because Omar Kro, the pasuk says, V'hoyu, and they shall be. So after it says, and then it says, V'hoyu, they meaning the Shel Yad and Shel Rosh, so they, in other words, you should have the yad when you're putting on the tov benecha. Calls man shebeinei necha, for as long as beinei necha you shtayim, there should be two. Rashi says that brings down from the Rashi, v'hoyu mashma shtayim. Hoyu has the understanding that it's two. That calls man sheyu beinei necha you shtayim. As long as they are, whenever there are between your eyes, there should be two. Beinei necha v'hoyu. V'hoyu beinei necha. There should be both of them when you have beinei necha. Calls man she'osim shel rosh menochin. As long as the shel rosh is lying, shel yad na menochin, then you also have those tefillin of shel yad. Alma. So we see the rosh cholz bereisha. So how are you going to have the yad menochin all the time? If you're going to take off the yad first, then the head is going to be by itself. So therefore, we have the tefillin of the head will be by itself. So almod the reish cholz bereisha must first move the head. Basically, in this drasha we have two psukim, two limudim. We have one limud which is about the placing of the tefillin. First, you place the shel yad, and only afterwards you place the shalosh as the order in the Gemara, as the order in the pasuk. And then we have another pasuk that tells us from which we learn that as long as time when it's on your head, you need to have the shel yad on your hand, and therefore it turns out you must remove the tefillin shel rosh so as not to have just the tefillin shel rosh. That's the Gemara. And the Rebbe will discuss later on. We'll see a lot of the details also. Why do we need the first part of the limud? The second part seems to be sufficient since you need to always have two. When the rosh is there, you must have the shel yad. So that tells us you must put on the shel yad also, just like it tells us that the shel yad has to be taken off after the shel rosh because it needs to be both of them when you have in the head. So the Gemara could have seemingly said just the rosh of Hoyu. Let's leave it for later. The Rebbe is going to ask this later. Now in Mechilta, in Pasuk, in the Mechilta on the verse, so this is the verse that we learned in the portion of this is Voeschanan already, but in the portion of Kaddish, and the Rebbe is also the others whole debate which exactly psukim do they mean, but the Rebbe proves from the lashon of l'cho, so that this is actually talking the Pashas Kaddish, the first one, not Voeschanan that follows the second pasuk. So over here they learn out from this pasuk. So the Mechilta learns out from this pasuk. He says like this: whenever you have the tefillin shel yad on the hand, while you have it, then you can put the shel rosh on the head. The pasuk says, then so you have to have the tefillin shel yad on the hand before you can put the tefillin shel rosh on the head. Tenes rosh b'rosh. Mekan omru. So from here the Chachamim tell us mitzvahs tefillin. The mitzvahs tefillin. Kshu noisim, when you place noisim shel yad, first you place the head. V'achach noisim shel rosh. Ukshu chayletz says shel rosh v'achach shel yad. When you remove, first you remove from the head, and then you remove from the hand. Now, it only says here the order of placing it would seem. It says should be and then how do we know when you take it off as well? The Rebbe is going to address it also later on. In Pashtus, the way we read the Mechilta just for now. So, but it's basically saying, since the order of Hatchila is that you have, whenever you have the on the head, then you put on the Rosh. So therefore, it also follows that when you take off, you should always take off first the head and then the head. Again, I said the Rebbe will address it later on. Doesn't seem there's evidence, so much evidence here. But nevertheless, the Sifri learns out both of these halachas, both when you put it on and also when you remove it. He learns them both out from the psukim, the pasuk in Parshas Boy, and the Gemara learns them out both from the pasuk in Parshas Voeschanan. Darf man verstehen. Aleph, number one, was is the time was the Gemara learned to raise them seder v'anochas tefillin from the pasuk. Why does the Gemara learn from the pasuk? Kshartem v'hoyu shebeparshas seinu. That's in our parsha. Or not from the pasuk, but steht free in Parshas Boy, not in the pasuk that says in Parshas Boy. Seemingly, it's a very similar pasuk. Over there, it says also lo yisal yodcha. Here it says shartim lo yisal yodecha. So why does the Gemara bring the pasuk of ukshartim and not the previous pasuk? The first time it's the Parshas Boy. Why are we talking about? Why are we bringing this down in the Parshas Voeschanan? And then the Mechilta, that's the way the Mechilta has it. And base number 2 from Parshas Gemara is that it seems from the simple Gemara, it seems as medarf onkommen zu zwei limudim, that we need to learn. We need to learn it out from 2 separate things. Ein limud of them din. One thing we learn the halacha that when you place first the hand and then you place the head. And then we have another lesson, a learning. We learn out of them din that when you remove, you will first remove the head and then you move the hand. So that's a separate pasuk we learn in the seams in the Gemara. Ashenkin like der mechilta is by the dinim vernar is gelernt from limit. Both laws are learned from the same pasuk. It's lo yisal yodcha. So why is there a difference between, first of all, the Gemara brings the second pasuk and 2 limudim, and the mechilta brings just 1 limud? Or maybe that's precisely because why the Gemara doesn't bring the first pasuk, because we need 2 limudim, according to the Gemara. That's why the Gemara brings the pasuk in our parsha, which we have first ukshartim lo yisal yodecha. Then we also have the limud from v'hoyu l'toitafei. So we have 2 limudim. Maybe that's the reason why. So the Rebbe says l'chayre beis l'chayre what we can answer kusha achas bechaverta. We can answer one question with the other ones. But first, we have to explain like the mechilta. According to the mechilta, v'azoi learned benarois from posik. How does the mechilta learn the second detail that when you remove, you also have to remove first the shalrosh, so that you always have the both tefillin when you have the shalrosh on. So how do we learn that out? That when you take off the shalrosh. How does he know that? There's only one pasuk over there. So the difference is between the two psukim, as the Rebbe explains now. Our pasuk talks about the person. Our pasuk, meaning the pasuk Voeschanan, talks about the gavra. Over there, we need 2 psukim because the first part talks about how he should do it when he puts on tefillin. There's a separate issue of what to do when we remove the tefillin. That's why we need a second pasuk. In the parshas of Kaddish, over there, it talks about where the tefillin should be placed. It's not talking about the placing them, the act of placing them, but it's talking about where they should be situated. So if we say they should be situated when then l'tutov is benenecha, so that automatically tells you that when you take off, you also have to be removed that way. The Rebbe is going to ask on this in the next book. Let's just see the explanation first. The bir bezeh, the chilik tzvishim dem tzivui, the difference between the command they should be for a sign on your hand, which is the portion in Parshas Boy, in Parshas Kaddish, in the section of Kaddish, when they're tzivui ukshartem lo yisal yodecha, and the command that we learn in our Parshas Seinu, you shall tie them for a sign on your hand, is Parshas Seinu is the mitzvahs asiyas hakshira shalodam. In our Parsha we talk about the mitzvah of doing the tying of the person. Ukshartem lo yisal yodecha. Ukshartem lo yisal yodecha. Mashenkin in pasuk v'hoyo l'chol lo yisal yodecha. But in the pasuk v'hoyo l'chol lo yisal yodecha, the Parshas Kaddish, over there, the Torah is not talking about the act of putting it on. It's talking about the tefillin will be a oisli yodcha. The Parshas Kaddish is the tzivu v'hoyo. As the tefillin zon zayin. But when the tefillin need to be la'oisal yodcha, zekarim b'neinecha. They need to be as a sign in your hand and remember to your right. The signal achar, using a little different style. The pasuk with Parshas Seinu red v'gen gavra. Our pasuk talks about the person. The Parshas Kaddish v'hoyo l'chol lo yodcha. Over there, there it should be, it talks about the object, that the tefillin should be on the person. When I use the Gemara read them Seder Hanochas Tefillin, since the Gemara talks about the order, the way we put on tefillin, mitzadem chiyuv gabra, because from the perspective how the person does it. Kshu maniach, when he puts on maniach shel yad, v'achach maniach shel rosh. The person who puts it on first puts on the hand, then he puts on the head. Learned is the Gemara aruch from the pasuk. So the Gemara derives this from the verse, who sees the mitzvahs hamaniach, where the mitzvah and the puts it on. Shartom the oisal yadecha, v'hader v'oilitatovas beinenecha. Over here, the pasuk talks about the person doing it. You shall tie them as a sign for your hand. V'oilitatovas beinenecha. The riber, because we're learning it from this pasuk over here, because we're talking about the person doing it. That's the subject matter in the Gemara, and that's the pasuk talking about Voeschanan. The riber daven hav ma'bezunder limud. That's why we need a separate learning for kol zman shebein nechad v'shtayim. From the pasuk of the top is that as long between your eyes, you need them both. If chalitz is tefillin, to know how you have to remove the tefillin. That doesn't have any connection to the obligation, the order, the way you put on the tefillin. It's one thing to put on the tefillin. So why should we take off the tefillin in the reverse order? It doesn't say anything. So we need a special pasuk of the tofis. In Mechil Tober, there's not talking about the mitzvah of placing the tefillin from the perspective of the man, nor the tefillin als a chefze sein, but rather the tefillin as an object. That tefillin are, there's such an object that becomes a sign for your hand and a remembrance between your eyes. The far is the limit from posik v'chol ha'oil v'chol ha'isal yotcha. So what do we learn out? So it should be to you as a sign on your hand. So we learn as kol zman shetfillin shel yad b'yad. We'll say that as long as whenever you have the tefillin ha'isal yotcha, then tenes shel rosh b'rosh, then you should give the head on the head. So in other words, you need the hand first. Ubemela, the same thing is true. Mekan omrus. That's what they say. Basement from them. So we also know from this. Benegel lemaisa ha'adam. So now we know from this. So therefore, how does the person act? Since we have to have them in a way that when it's a sign, it always has to be on your head, on the hand first before the head. So we know how the person acts in Beit Zmanim. When he puts on, he puts the hand. And when he takes out, first he puts on the hand, then he puts on the head. So when he removes them, first he takes off the shulrosh, and then the shayad. But in them, because in the idea that the object should be lying over there, what difference does it make? We're not talking about the way you put it on. We're not talking the order of putting it on. We're talking about how it's being, when it's placed. When it's placed, we're saying when it's placed, the hand comes first, and the head has to be placed after the hand. So therefore, when you put it on, you have to put on the hand first and then the head. And when you take it off, you take off the head first and then the hand. But the meaning from Vahoyo is because when we talk about it should be where it's stationed, that place. So it doesn't make a difference when you put it on and take it off. It's always the same thing when it's on your head. So since when it's on your head, first the yad, and then there has to be the head. So when the head needs to always be two, and therefore if you take off, you have to take off the head first and then the head. Gimel. Es ist aber schwer, as einzulernen. This is difficult to answer this in such a way. Warum? Because. So first the Rebbe brings down the brackets. In addition to the problem of them, based on this, it's not so comfortable, it's not so smooth, the beginning of the language of the Mechilta. Mechilta starts off with Kol Zman Shetfillin Shel Yad B'Yad. When you have the Tefillin Shel Yad, Teines Shel Rosh B'Rosh. So basically, he's talking about the Tefillin Shel Yad, and then he says you should play the Rosh B'Rosh. But according to the Rebbe's learning that we're talking about the Chefza when it's on the head, that it should be two. Well, if you're now taking the should have said in an opposite way. Tiya shel rosh b'rosh should always be, the head should always be on the head. Kol zman, as long as the hand, all the time, anytime when there is the hand, the yad is on the hand, the rosh should be in the head, because that's the main point is that the rush is on the head whenever there's that there needs to be a yad there. That would be a language which would be talking about how they are on his body. Not a language which talks about how the person places them. So besides that, the Rebbe says, but as in Sifri, before we talk about the Mechilta, but in the Sifri, the Parsha Seinu stated is Lama Loshen the Mechilta. But there, he uses the same language as the Mechilta. It says, Koz man, shall yad biyad ten shel rosh b'rosh. So, it is exactly in Loshen. Mekan amruk sh'neis tefillin neis shel yad tchila v'achkach shel rosh. Even they say they put the wow shel cheletz shel rosh tchila v'achkach cheletz shel yad. It says the same Loshen. Apa b'kein, learned as the Sifri HaRosh from the Pasuk of Parseinu. So where does he learn it out that you need to have, even though he says the Loshen Koz Man Shel Yad, he learns out the Sifri HaRosh from the Pasuk of Parseinu. He learns from our Parsha. He learns out this halacha, and not from the Mechilta Pasuk that he brings from the Parshas Kaddish in the Parshas Boy. So, here the Pasuk says, Ukshartom. So we're talking about the Chiv Mitzvah Nachas Tefillah Shalom. So we see that there's something more, not just because this is the Chiv and this is that's the Chefza, this is the Gabra. Another thing the Rebbe says, we also have to understand, after the Gemara learns from Vahoyu. As close, time as always when it's between your eyes should be two. It's Kishev in my time of our statement. That from this reason we understand. As then when it removes the head and then the Chel Yad, because you need to have them both on your head. So therefore, they need to be both when they're on your head. So you can't take off the yad first. The Gemara sagt, so we also know as so we also know when you place, you have to place first the head and then the rush. As the Mechilta says, why does the Gemara need the first part to bring out the order of the tzivu? That first you put the yad and then you put the be'enecha. That doesn't seem to be needed, because the fact that you always need the shalyad while the sharash is there, you can't have the sharash while shalyad. That necessitates it automatically, but you first have to put on the shalyad and then the sharash, and you first have to remove the sharash and then you remove the shalyad. So the Rebbe says, Take. So maybe we can say as Einochinam, that is taka true. After the Gemara brings the pasuk, to tell you that you need according to this conclusion, we learn both halachas. Side the both halachas, that first you put the yad and then the rosh. Also, from them was Omer Kro. We learn it from what the Gemara says later on. As long as they're between your eyes, it will be true. So we also know both things, even the first part. The reason why the Gemara brought it down, that was before we had the drush of Hoyu, the Tutafas Ben Enecha. But after the Gemara learns about the Tutafas Ben Enecha, we know the first thing also. That they use this as the reason why we put up first the Tzalyan and then the Shorosh. And then this also fits with the Sifri, which the Sifri had Rebbe quoted, also says that we learn from the Pasuk, both halachas. But according to this, we have even more difficulty with this question. Since at the end the Gemara learns up both of these halachas from the one limit from Bahayu with the Mechilta, we don't need two separate psukim. The Mechilta learns both dinim from one pasuk. It also learns from one pasuk here. And Tavos learned as the Gemara when they're free. Those the Gemara is from Nitaruis and the free the pasuk in Parshas Kaddish. So why don't they learn it from the previous pasuk in the pasuk of Kaddish? The Rosh Mechilta. Also, we need to explain in the basic Fani Limud these two ways of learning, whether this is a mitzvah of the Gavra or it's a Chefza, is Tzidach Chilik Tzuzei Nor Mashmos Dorshin. Or we learn it from the pasuk Ukshartem, or we learn it from Parshas Kaddish. Is it only it's very Nor Mashmos Dorshin? It's only how we should expound it. This pasuk, that pasuk. Then there's a question: why didn't the Gemara bring the previous pasuk? But it's just a mashmos version. Or maybe there is a difference in halacha from which verse we learn it, whether we learn from the Parshas Kaddish and Boi, or we learn from Voeschanan. We also find there's different languages between the Mechilta and Sifri. Again, the Mechilta uses the pasuk from Parshas Kaddish and Boi. Sifri uses the pasuk from here in the Voeschanan. Aleph in Mechilta is the Loshen Mekan Omru Mitzvahs Tefillin Chulu. The Mitzvahs Tefillin. Sifri Mekan Omru Kshanesh Tefillin Chulu. The Mitzvahs Tefillin when he puts it from Beis and Sifri, Zer Meisik Kshanesh Tefillin Neisen Shayat Chila. He puts first. Adds the word Chila at the beginning first. Mashenke Mechilta over there, it doesn't say. It says just you give it to Shal Yad, and then you give the Shal Rush.